It's been a great day, right? And you all have been a fantastic audience. You've really been great at participating with the different things that folks have been asking of you. And I really love this model, right, where we're talking together about these things and we're kind of trying to read the room to understand where you're at. Earlier you heard about essentialism from Erica, and now I'm going to totally stress you out because this is kind of a tension. How do you keep up technical skills now that you've taken this engineering role as manager? And so essentialism is actually going to be a really important part of making trade-offs and putting those like big boulders in the jar, if you know that analogy, and thinking long-term. So it's in tension, but these two things can go together. So again, polling the audience, I want to get a sense here. Let's talk about coding, hands-on coding. I want to know how many people in this group are currently hands-on coding, either in your team's code base, or you're active on an open source project, or you are actively developing some side project this week or last week. Can you raise your hand? And keep them up. Okay, now, over the last 6 months, you've done some active coding in one of these categories. Raise more hands if you've done it in 6 months. And then how about a whole year? Raise your hands anytime in the last year you've done some coding. I think this looks like about 50% of the people who have not done any coding, and that includes me, haven't done any coding in the last year, hands-on. And so if you were coming back here in a year from now, there's going to be fewer hands raised, right? And a year from then, because you're moving forward in your engineering career and in your management roles and responsibilities, and so you're probably getting less time to code. So what are we going to do about that? We're going to use as a visual indicator of this pattern my GitHub, which is a little scary, and I feel a little vulnerable, and maybe you feel a little bit of this as well. So who am I? So I'm Kathleen Vigneault, and I work at Twitter. I am a director in platform engineering, and I work with infrastructure teams and our public cloud services team, and so we together are charting our hybrid cloud future at Twitter, so it's really awesome and exciting. And before I came to Twitter, I worked at Wired, where I was an engineer, and then the tech lead, and then the manager, and the director. So we're going to look at my span, just because, that's the story I have to tell you. So let's look at the stats graph in GitHub. We're going back to 2014. I was still at Wired. I was the tech lead on my team, and I'm obviously doing a lot of contributions, hands-on coding, even after August when I became the manager of the team. So that includes some of you here. You're still actively coding, right? And then we get to 2015, and I'm still managing, but I'm still actively coding, but it's starting to drop off a little bit. And then we get to 2016. What happened, right? Well, so what happened was I left Wired, and I went to go work at Twitter, and Twitter's Git is not in Git, we have our own Git. So even if I was actively coding, you would not see that here. But the truth is, that's what it would look like. So, and you can probably extrapolate, and so we'll talk about that later, the future after 2016. Okay, you get the picture. So who cares, right? We know. We chose to be managers, and we knew that we were going to have to get a little bit stepped back from the code. We were going to let our tech leads take more of a lead. We were going to give people autonomy. So we know this is going to happen to us. So why does this matter? Well, that's the reason this matters is because we face a pretty real danger that our technical skills are going to become obsolete in pretty short order, right? And meanwhile, our teams are looking to us to provide technical direction and strategy and guidance. So according to a study by Benjamin Artz, Amanda Goodall, and Andrew Oswald of 35,000 employees, the benefit of having a highly competent boss is easily the largest positive influence on a typical worker's level of job satisfaction. No pressure, right? But okay, what do we do about this? So when engineers look up the management chain and they see competent technical leaders, they like their jobs better. The study goes on to describe why doctors should lead hospitals, why scholars should lead universities, and why basketball players should be coaches. But here's the difference. If you were a basketball player, you can probably rely on the things that you learned 20 years ago. Those rules are pretty much the same in basketball, right? But if you got your computer science degree 20 years ago, and then you didn't do any more coding, and now you're trying to give people some technical guidance, how would you even begin to do that, right? There's a lot that has happened in the time in between. So let's take some examples, some real examples. So again, these are just my timelines because that's the story that I'm able to tell. You could probably pick other dates. But I was at Wired from 2012 to 2016. And while I was there, we went from taking a zip file and FTPing it, deploy. I saved a copy on my laptop so I could roll back. Right? That was how we deployed. Then we had Git, and then we had Jenkins, and then we added Puppet, and then we started building APIs, and then we moved to AWS, and then we went through many different JavaScript libraries and landed on React, right? Each of these things, you could take and give a whole talk about how these have fundamentally shifted the way we work, the way we deploy, the way we test, the way we code. And now if we look at my time at Twitter. When I started at Twitter, GraphQL was the big thing. It's changing the way we think about API endpoints. And machine learning is huge. And how do we manage our data pipelines now with machine learning as a focus? Twitter is going through a change where we are doing more and more in AWS and GCP. So that's a big thing for us right now, even though many of y'all have probably done that earlier. And Kubernetes, right? Like, okay, your server, it just dies. And you have to build for that reality. That's a fundamental shift. So these things are happening in our industry all of the time, and we have to keep up. But it's so hard, right? We're managers, and there's many challenges to this, so let's talk about some of the reasons why this is very hard for us. So some of the problems with being hands-on, some of you may be feeling a little bit of this. The big blocks of maker time. I don't know how Billy Sue does it with those chunks of time in her calendar that she's able to block out. I have tried that. I'm not as good. I don't know. I just can't find maker time. And maybe you feel that too. Times that I have tried to do a little side thing in my team's code base. So one time I thought, I was new to the group at Twitter, and I thought, I should probably try to get a little bit hands-on, really understand what my team's doing. And so I thought, I'll just take this thing from way down in the backlog. Nobody really cares about it, but it'll be a good project, a little teeny thing I can do. 5-line YAML change, no big deal. And it's even in a code base that nobody needs to, it's not blocking anything, I swear. And so I make the change, I kick off a build, and then run off to meetings. Meeting. And then guess what happens when I come back? The build failed. Oh, that's no big deal, I'll just kick it off again. And then go off to meetings, come back. The build's still failing. I do not have time to troubleshoot this build. I don't even know about the build. I've never even run this process before. And a couple days pass by and I'm not able to deal with it because I'm so busy. And one of my engineers pings me and says, hey, Kathleen, do you want me to commandeer your build for you and fix it? And I'm like, oh, yes, of course, yes, I don't have time to do this. And also now this is a highly skilled engineer who was working on much more important stuff. And she had to stop what she was doing to clean up my manager mess. Lesson learned. Okay. Anyway, also when you get too hands-on, sometimes you're just really not letting your team step up and take charge and have that autonomy and ownership. So moving on, leadership priorities. How are you gonna focus your time? Probably you didn't get much management training in computer science school, engineering school, whatever you did before, right? And so when you become an engineering manager, it's like, okay, management, no idea, right? Well, that's how I felt the first time I did it. So we don't have a lot of knowledge in this area. That's part of why all of us are here. And so if we're gonna spend time learning things, it's a lot of the time going to be in the management space. It's gonna be in strategic thinking. It's gonna be on developing our soft skills, and that doesn't leave a lot of time for also developing our technical skills. And then finally, these tech trends, they change really, really fast, and there's a lot of new things to learn, and almost too many things to learn, and how would you pick? And I remember Backbone, should we do Backbone, Angular, Ember, React? And those of us who spent time in Backbone, oh well, not a great investment, right? If you picked React early, woo, that was a good use of your time. But we're always, figuring out these trade-offs, right? Like what to learn. It's hard. All right, so you've got to choose growth because your choices are not really choices, right? You can either just stick with whatever it was you studied in school or whatever you did as an engineer and kind of like, okay, that's my base knowledge and now I'm managing. But at a certain point, that's kind of running out on you, and so you really have to choose to continue to grow. All right, so if we take an example list of like all the things that I'm interested in learning, and then other people have shown a slide like this. This is the calendar, right? And this is the work calendar, and this doesn't take into account my family, my kids, my hobbies, sleep, exercise, friends, hobbies, So how does one even find time? And this looks different for everyone. So some people can do the thing where you code 15 minutes a day. And some people can do the thing where you block out the maker time. That's awesome, and if that works for you, that's awesome. That just never worked for me. So what has worked for me has been kind of spurts, sporadic chunks of time wherever I can grab it. And so I tend to think more quarterly. What's a thing I can do sometime this quarter? And from quarter to quarter to quarter, it's different. Sometimes it might be a side coding project. Sometimes it might be just a little scripting. Sometimes it might be a class, a workshop. It's always something a little bit different, but over time, if you have that long view, building skills over time. So this is what works for me. It's like noticing that I've got a free weekend coming up. I'm like, Saturday. I'm gonna try and do a little project end to end. I gotta be done by the end of the day because I don't have any other time. So that works for me. So you have to kind of think, how are you gonna slot this stuff in? Now we're coming to the part of the talk where I'm just gonna throw a million ideas at you. Don't get overwhelmed. What I really want you to do is just think that I'm trying to give you ideas. I'm just trying to help you pick one thing. Just start with one thing. All right, so the first category of things you might be able to do to improve your technical skills are understanding the systems and the people that you manage. So how can you do in the context of your job some of these things? So probably a lot of you are reading design docs, fair? And some of you are doing code review, as long as it's not blocking. You might be setting up the dev environment, running through the build, just so you know how that works. And now you've got a local environment that you can play in, and that can be really satisfying. You could prototype maybe, play around with different ideas for your team. And I've talked to different people, like, what do you do? When one guy told me, like, oh yeah, I build prototypes and show them to the team. One of the managers that I managed came onto our team, and he was brand new, and he was so smart because in those first weeks, he sat down and pair programmed with every engineer, and so he learned about the person, and he learned about the code base. And I need to say that it's so important to do it in the beginning because it's very hard 6 months down the road to go, hey, can I pair program with you? And you're like, what? Why are you looking over my shoulder? Like, it's a weird thing the further out you get from being new. But if you do it when you're new, like that's a really precious time. Don't waste it. Take the time to learn things. When the team does a brown bag or a code walkthrough, or if I encourage this to happen, I'm like, yeah, it's good for all of you to do a code walkthrough, but I'll just sit back here and watch, because I'm learning, right? And one other idea somebody gave me is that she used to like to go through and just clean up, janitorial style, those libraries that nobody was using, that old code, those services that nobody had stopped to clean up, and that was a value to the team, and also a way for her to exercise her understanding of what was connected to what. So next, we have automating management tasks. So I know a lot of engineering managers who get very excited about these little tools. So setting up system dashboards and metrics, writing scripts. I know an engineering manager that I work with who has used Google APIs with the calendar API and app scripts. So when there's a meeting, there's an automatically attached template that has an agenda, and then when the meeting's over, it pre-populates, anyway. He's gotten really into Google App Scripting just as a fun side thing that makes his job easier. It's coding, but it doesn't have anything to do with his team. I talked to one friend, she told me that someone in her group had built a Chrome extension to go in LinkedIn and pull out information about somebody they wanted to recruit for their team, to do an auto-populated email. oh, that's pretty cool. And it'd be fun to build a Chrome extension. There's bots, Alexa, Slack, IFTT. I know one engineering manager who built the whole pipeline for interview code challenges where they'd send the code challenge out to the candidate sends it back, and then they just run it through a process that would do automatic grading for them. And he built that on the side as a manager, right? Just little things to speed processes. And of course, you can always do some interesting third-party software integration work. This is all things you can do outside of the scope of the team, but they help you. There's always side projects. I know not always do we have time for side projects. What I do is I sometimes make commitments to give a technical talk that I don't know anything about, and then I have to learn it. So I did that once for Grace Hopper. I needed to give a technical talk for our Twitter recruiting event, and so I said, okay, I'm gonna build a Twitter bot. No idea how to do that. And so because I made the accountability step of promising something to someone, I spent the weekend and I built a Twitter bot, and it was really cool to learn more about our API, to learn more about our terms of service. Hackathons, this week is Twitter's hackathon, and today I'm missing the science fair, which is one of the most fun days at Twitter, but there'll be another one. But hackathons are a good opportunity if you can to just take off the manager hat and just sit down and do a little bit of coding, do some sort of a project. Contributing to open source, we mentioned that before. I had a lot of fun on my team with our code challenge because we let candidates work on that code challenge in any programming language they wanted to, and then we would run a test script to do a performance assessment, and so we'd have to write the test script in the language. So I wrote that thing in Haskell, I wrote it in Scala, I wrote it in Python, I wrote it in React. It was small and short, but it was cool because I had to figure out how to install the language, how to do a little bit of writing of these different types of code, what was needed. And a friend of mine had a son in high school. He was taking a coding class and he got stuck on something. So he called me up and we spent 2 hours debugging his little Khan Academy JavaScript application. And again, it's just like little things to keep the muscle memory of coding and remembering how it all works together. So whenever I go to a conference, in terms of keeping up with trends, all the things we do for that, I try to do the hands-on workshops. So for example, I went to Velocity and I did a Lambda workshop. So it was all working with AWS and building a Lambda function and then deploying a web application that way. And just getting to do that through a step, forcing myself to sign up for this workshop, which gave me the time, and then having now a mental picture of how Lambda functions work. Or I did a Kubernetes workshop a couple years ago that spinning up pods and shutting them down. Like, oh, that's what they're talking about. I don't know about you, but I gotta touch it. I gotta see it. Reading an article is not enough for me. So I really look for those opportunities. I have also used the technique, again, this is an accountability trick where I will set up a class and then invite a whole bunch of people and now I have to go. So anything I can do to force that into my schedule, I'm looking for those. Another idea that somebody gave me was to go to conferences and actually go around to those demo booths and do more than just get their swag. You can actually ask for a demo, and it is pretty interesting to see. What's the New Relic demo? What's the Datadog demo? What are they doing right now? What are they building? And what are their customers asking for? There's a meta level of information to be had there that's helping me understand where things are going. All right. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what does this all have to do with your career path. I'm pushing it. What do you need me to do? Whoa, okay, whatever. I'm thinking really broadly about my career path, and I'm thinking how all of these little pieces over a long period of time are building my competency technically toward bigger things. And so a lot of times, especially at a big tech company, that tends to move you from the specialist to the generalist over time. And so looking for those opportunities to do something that is technically unfamiliar or stepping into a new technical domain is going to provide a lot of learning. A year ago, I went from managing full stack engineering teams I was a full stack engineer, so that felt very comfortable to me. And I stepped into managing core infrastructure, less comfortable. And it was a huge risk. And I thought, well, I'm not gonna pretend to these engineers that I am stepping in as an expert in core infrastructure, because I'm not. But the problem to be solved in that group had a lot to do with collaboration, and I felt well equipped to help build relationships with our peer teams that had been broken. And I told everyone I'm gonna need time to learn. And people did give me that time to learn. And in this year, it's been an incredible opportunity to learn and to be immersed and to read all the design docs. And also to take a lot of training. I took Google Cloud Architect training recently, just trying to shove these things in. Oh, and I want to tell you one other thing about that. I have tried twice to take the Google Cloud Architecture training. The first time was about a year ago when I inherited all these teams, 40 people, all this new domain. And then I signed up for the training and I couldn't complete it. It was just too much. And so it would also say that sometimes you're gonna try to fit these things in and it's just not gonna work. And that's okay, you keep trying. Like maybe 25% of the time, it's a miss, didn't get to do it, I tried, I put it in my calendar, it didn't work out. 75% of the time I'm getting it done. 75% of the time, it is happening. So don't give up on the first try. People talk about this IC manager pendulum, and I always really want to encourage people who want to go back and forth. Like, that's a great opportunity. I mean, if an IC was a manager and then goes back to being IC, they're a fantastic IC who understands the challenges of managers, right? And if they're a manager and then they go back to IC for a while and come back to management, like now they have new technical skills, like it's win-win-win. I've heard of people taking learning sabbaticals where they have a side project or an app they've always wanted to build, that side thing, and it just is an itch they want to scratch, so they just take some time off and they go build the thing and come back and they get new technical skills doing that. And I see how people get different opportunities based on whether they're a startup or a large company, or do you want scale, or do you want to wear all the hats? So these are things to think about as you take these opportunities. What kind of technical development are you going to get as you go along? All right, so moving on. What am I doing wrong? I'm pushing the wrong button. Oops. So now we're going to go back to my GitHub. So I promised you it would look like this. You knew it was going to look like this. So here's the thing. This is what I decided to do. I decided to give myself credit for all the stuff I've been doing over the last 3 years. So the first category is orange. It's technical conferences and workshops. The yellow is technical classes and tutorials I've taken. The red is projects, coding, scripts, backfill jobs I one time ran, bug fixes, whatever. And blue is design doc review. So this is a picture of my technical development. I feel much better about this. And it just reminds me that I have been investing over the long haul, quarter after quarter, little by little, to make sure that I'm keeping up with the changes in our industry. And also the other thing about this is it reminds me that I can. If you go a year without learning anything new, you start to doubt that you can keep learning new things. And the longer you let that go, the harder it's gonna be to really remember, like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to learn new things. I can still get back on that horse. All right, so we talked about some ways to take care of your future. I wanna show you a few other reasons, right? So you don't have to read this whole thing, but this is a career ladder, and it's for a director. And I just want you to notice that it says technical competence is required for a director, strong technical background is required, contributing to architecture and design efforts, and scaling. And then if we look at a job description, this happens to be from Google for a director position. This is looking for sound technical decision-making, architecture design discussions, and detailed technical guidance at the director level. So you're starting to see, this is not just a nice to have. This is something you need for your career development. These are engineering manager questions from Google, from Glassdoor, just as an example, but we're looking at distributed key store value or key value questions, Unix internal questions, data structures, what have you. Very technical, right? So we are expected, even though like our day job is pretty separated. When we are ready for the next step, ready for the next move, like, we have to demonstrate our technical competencies. So I encourage you to stay relevant. It's for the benefit of your company. It's to improve the job satisfaction of your engineers, and it is to invest in your future. So I gave you a lot of ideas. Remember, just choose one. Don't get overwhelmed. Just choose one. Pick a thing. What are you going to learn next? Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you tweet at me.